My name is Danielle McCulloch, and I am the Deputy Program Manager with the Flight Opportunities Program. And I will turn my camera on just to say hello for a moment, and then we'll go back to the slides here. Hopefully you can hear us okay. I wanted to apologize for being a bit late this morning. We're having just a few technical difficulties here, but thanks so much to all of you for joining us for this session. We know that Dual Anonymous Peer Review, or DAPR, is a new part of the TechFlights solicitation. And so we wanted to provide you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have as you're preparing your full proposal. I'm going to do just a quick reminder here to make sure that our video is being recorded this morning so that other people can use this. And we will launch right in here. You should see a Q&A option in your WebEx window here. And so if you do have a question throughout our session, please put that in there. We do give you the option to not use your full name, so you can remain anonymous here, so feel free to do that as well. But we do want you to feel free asking questions here. If you have other questions that come up after this, please use the NSPIRE's Q&A option there, and we'll make sure that these questions and answers get posted in the Q&A. All right, so yep, Kevin, you can go ahead to that next slide and I'll walk through any other logistics that I might have missed. All right, so as you can see, we do have everyone's cameras off and microphones off today, so please do stay muted. You can, again, use that Q&A in the section of the WebEx to ask any questions you might have. Again, since we are trying to remain, use anonymity in this, think carefully about how your questions are asked when you pose them there. In theory, only the moderators can see your question, but we have had snafus happen where unexpected things have happened. So again, just use care when you are posting those questions. There is no option to ask a voice question or raise your hand in this format, but you can either ask your question here or, like I said, use NSPIRES to do that. Our goal is to post a recording of this session as well as the slides from this session on NSPIRES, and then we will also respond to any other questions that come up here. We'll put these in the FAQ as well. All right, next slide, Kevin. So let's just review for a moment why we added dual anonymous peer review to TechFlights. Our goal is really to ensure that we are focused on the technical merit of proposals. And so we want to make sure that everybody has a fair chance and that we try to eliminate any bias that might be unconscious among any of us and really make it an equitable process. And so dual anonymous peer review has been shown to be one of the methods that can be used to do this. And so we did implement it this year on TechFlights, as all of you saw in the mandatory preliminary proposals. All of our proposals that come in do go through a compliance review prior to going to subject matter experts. We realize that this isn't a perfect process, so we really try to work with everybody to make sure that we help you on the front end so that you can better write your anonymous proposals, and make sure that we try to use a little bit of grace during this process. So today's session, we'll talk about kind of where those boundaries are and how to tackle some of these things where you really want to be able to show the work that you've done, the resources that you have access to, but still remain anonymous. All right, next slide, Kevin. Oh, actually, so you don't need to go back, but just, I think there's a point in there that I missed, is that how this process works is that the proposals are reviewed anonymously first. So all of those anonymous sections that you do are looked at for technical merit. Then after that has been done, there are programmatic factors that come into play with respect to balancing of the types of technologies that we're trying to do. And we're looking at educational components and such. And so we do look at the non-anonymized portions to get a little bit more information about what you are trying to do, but that comes after the technical merit portion. All right, so just as a review for the full proposals, which parts are anonymized versus not? So the technical and management section is anonymized, and this is that main section of the proposal where your relevance and technical approach are covered. The references and citations should be anonymized, and there is information online about how to do that. The flight provider quote is also anonymized, so those flight providers should give you a quote back that does not include your name so that our team can see your specific quote, but not have your identity revealed. And so this is the first time the flight providers have been asked to do this as well. They are following along with all of this here, but they might forget. So make sure that when you get a quote from them, you get an anonymized version in addition to the full version. And then cost and schedule are also anonymized. Then you have the non-anonymized appendix that has your qualifications and capabilities, current and pending support, statements of commitment or those letters of resource support, those flight provider quotes that are non-anonymized, so we can see they actually gave you that quote, the acceptance of safety responsibility, and then the educational involvement description if it applies to your proposal. All right, next slide, please. So the summary chart, especially for those of you who have proposed in the past, has changed a little bit so that it can be anonymous. So this is where you put that top level critical information for the proposal. Make sure that you don't include any information about your team members or organizations here. So again, if you proposed before, don't use your old template. Make sure that you use the one that's included with this year's appendix. All right, next slide, please. So this is also in the materials that are online, but these are the required cost tables that you need to have. So you do need to fill those out. So make sure that when you do this part, it stays anonymous. And then on the next slide, you can go to that, Kevin. This is where it gets a little bit more detailed. So you'll see the example at the bottom. Rather than a person being listed, you're just going to list a role description for them. So co-I 1, team member 1, engineer 1, and keep everything very generic as you are posting these people out. We don't need to know their names. We just need to know the role that they are doing. And so you want to make sure that you just use descriptors, not actual names here. All right, next slide, please. So with the review process for the full proposal, like I mentioned, there'll be first a compliance review where we look at, the font size, the number of pages, all of those things, in addition to your adherence to the DAPR requirements. And again, these are all listed in the solicitation appendix should you have questions, but don't hesitate to use the Q&A through NSPIRES as well if you have questions beyond today. So that compliance review happens first, and then the technical panel peer review with all of the subject matter experts happens, and that is anonymous. So you want to make sure that you are sharing everything about your technology and your proposal that they need to know, that you cannot count on your reputation to help your proposal here. You need to make sure you put that all down on paper. So then we have a prioritized recommendation that comes out of that. And then this is where there are programmatic and other considerations that come into that final decision, no different than last year. Just to be clear, these are things like budget allocations, portfolio balancing, past performance type of things. It is not preferential to particular proposers here. So this isn't a preferential selection, just to make that clear in terms of where the anonymization or not comes in. Proposers will be notified as to whether they're selected or not in the same fashion as before. And and anyone can request a debrief within 10 business days of notification to find out more. All right, next slide, please. So just some things to remember. So make sure you do not include your name as a PI or your institution, any of your team member names or members of the teams and institutions. Make sure that your references are all anonymized, so don't provide specific details. And then clearly things like logos, watermarks, you would want to make sure that you're not including. It is okay to mention details about resources that you're using. You just need to be a little bit careful about how you do this. So NASA programs, NASA supported campaigns, NASA test sites, programs that you're looking at for infusion or transition of your technology, previous funding, flight providers. all of those you can mention. You just want to disconnect yourself from them so that they aren't identifying. So you can say that you have access to these things, or they have been resources in the past, or these are ways that you're connected, but not identify yourself. And similarly with mentioning specific NASA staff or centers. So Kevin, can you go to that next slide? All right, so this has, it's a lot of words here, but this has quite a bit of guidance for you. So trying to clarify what we mean by those the general advice before. So do not include names of personnel associated with the proposal or their organizational affiliations. So in the page headers, the footers, images, figures, all of those things. Make sure that you've stripped everything out of all of that. Then there's a way that you can write the references as well, and using the square brackets technique that corresponds to the full citation in that appendix helps to make sure that you can still cite and show that there's a reference there, but not put in the details that might be identifying. And all of this is written in the appendix guidance as well. When citing references or previous experience, you can use the third person wording as well. And so replacing phrases like as we have demonstrated in the past with as previously demonstrated. And then I alluded to this a little bit before, but it's also common if a team member has institutional access to unique facilities, so be that a lab, a specific instrumentation, samples, etc., that you're using to do your work, you don't have to not include that. However, you just want to show that you have access to it in a way that doesn't identify the team member. So we've included an example here. The team has access to a regolith testing facility at JPL, which will enable us to examine the properties of regolith in similar conditions to those found on the moon. So you, in this case, which they're not allowed to propose, but if you were a PI at JPL, you wouldn't want to say this in a way that this allows you to say this in a way that doesn't highlight what your organization is. And so just pointing out that you have access to, even if it happens to be at your home organization, helps you keep that anonymity. All right, and this note here is that in that not anonymized appendix, you can include more detailed information. All right, next, I think that was the end of the slides that we have prepared. All right, so what we are going to do here is we have some questions that came in earlier via the Q&A, and so we are going to read those out and share those answers with the group here verbally. We will also post them on the FAQs on NSPIRES. If you have additional questions, please go ahead and post those in the Q&A section here, and we will try to answer those to the best of our ability on this call. It may be that some can't be answered here, and in that case, we'll take them offline and we will answer them via the FAQ. We also might have a few moments of silence as we try to answer your questions live here on the fly. And also, just as a note here, we will be fairly DAPR focused in this Q&A because those are the resources that we have with us here. If there are questions related to other technical matters in the solicitation, we will capture those and we'll post them in the FAQ, but we might not be able to answer them live here. All right, I am going to go off camera and I'm going to let my colleague Liz DeVito go through some of the questions and answers that we have gotten so far.
Thanks, Danielle. How can you anonymize a technology that might be publicly known? See Section 2.5 of the Guidelines for Proposers to Space Tech Ready Dual Anonymous Peer Review Programs document, available on the NSPIRES page where this appendix is located, for best practices on how to do your best in anonymizing proprietary or publicly known technology or resources. Remember that the goal of dual anonymous peer review is to not make it completely impossible to guess the identities of the proposers, but to shift the focus of the discussion away from the individuals and toward the proposed technology development and testing. Expertise, resources, and educational involvement are not anonymized. Are they part of the evaluation scores? If so, how will the judges compile the anonymized and non-anonymized sections? As outlined in the appendix, proposal sections related to technical merit will be reviewed in an anonymized process. After the anonymous technical review, a final review will be performed where the expertise and resources are reviewed to verify that each team provides evidence that they have the capabilities and access to appropriate facilities to execute the proposed plan. Proposal scores will not be impacted by this assessment. After the peer review of the proposals has been completed, programmatic aspects such as portfolio balancing, educational impact, and past performance relative to flight opportunities and small spacecraft technology program activities, including schedule performance, mission execution, timely delivery of required technical supports, and timely delivery of required technical reports, will be used by NASA to make the final decision. Are the flight providers subject to the anonymity details that we're seeing in the new language around team identification? A description of the platform will likely make it obvious who or what the proposers are identifying. In the situation where a proposer is acting as both the PI and the flight provider organization, the proposer must adhere to the same anonymity requirements as all other proposers to the solicitation. By anonymizing the PI, other proposing team members, and their organization, reviewers will have no explicit knowledge that the flight provider and proposer are from the same organization. For the Space Tech Ready 2022 TechFlights solicitation, besides filling in the required cost table and the government personnel cost table, is there someplace else in the proposal that you want a more detailed description of the project budget presented? And if so, where? And Danielle, I'll let you go ahead and answer that one.
All right. So this one is per the solicitation on pages 32 and 33 and the full proposal section number 4. It talks about the flight provider quote, cost, and schedule anonymized. And it does ask that you provide an anonymized budget with justification for each cost element proposed. And so the required cost table and government personnel cost table are part of this same section.
Since the MPP proposal submission, if the technical team has changed due to budget considerations without changing the scope of the work proposed, how does the proposer need to address this in the proposal to ensure this does not affect the fate of the submitted proposal?
So you need to make sure that the current technical team is listed on the NSPIRE's cover page for the full proposal. It does not need to be addressed elsewhere in the proposal.
We have a partner who will be supplying an imager that is supported by an active SBIR award that can prove in-kind funding. Our home institution may provide in-kind support as well. Can we state these facts without identifying the instrument or institution and maintain anonymity?
Yes, you can state the facts as long as you do maintain that anonymity by not including information that would reveal the identity of the proposer or their institution. So I would point you back to that example that we just covered in the slides about stating that you have access.
We will be hardening an existing prototype imager for stratospheric flight. Can we refer to the existing imager in generic terms without compromising anonymity?
It is okay to refer to a specific imager, for example. While you would want to avoid stating that you own the imager, you can provide specifics about the imager that support your proposal. Also, you could state the organization that owns the imager, for example. Just do not state or imply that you are also part of this organization. Similarly, if you want to use a particular facility, you can state that specific facility, just do not specify or imply that you are also part of this organization.
And Danielle, I'm going to pause here for just a minute.
Okay. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in that we are not able to answer on today's call. And so if your question is not answered, we will answer it offline and we will post the answer in the Q&A section or the FAQ section of NSPIRES for this solicitation. So we are going to pause for just a second. It's going to be quiet for just a moment. We aren't gone, but we are going to work to answer another question or two. Okay, Liz, I think we have a couple more ready, starting with number 6.
Cool. Is it possible to add flight operator as subcontract even though they were not proposal team in the NOI submission? This is necessary to avoid overhead charged by the proposing institute. If we show them as service providers, the budget becomes problematic.
Changes to team members are allowed between the MPP and full proposal. It is up to the proposer to determine whether they want to add the flight provider as a team member or as a service provider.
Is dual anonymized review just for the FO program, or will it be the standard format for other NRAs? Several programs oh, sorry, Danielle, go ahead.
No worries, no worries. So several programs in NASA are considering moving or are moving to dual anonymous peer review. But this meeting today concerns only the Flight Opportunities TechFlights solicitation for 2022. Other groups within NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate are considering how this type of review might fit into their solicitations as part of its efforts to achieve greater diversity and equity. NASA's Science Mission Directorate intends to make DAPR the default review mechanism across its programs within the next few years, which is a commitment the agency made in the recent NASA Equity Action Plan. So keep your eyes open moving forward. All right, we do have time to take other questions. Are there any others from the audience? Please do put those in the Q&A portion of the WebEx screen. All right, I will make one last call. If you don't think of your questions here and you do want to ask in the future, again, please use the standard questions format in the solicitation. You can email your questions via NSpires, and we will do our best to very quickly come up with answers for you and post those in the FAQ. You should check back with that FAQ frequently. You can see the dates at which new questions and answers were added, so you can get a sense of which ones you hadn't seen yet. And for those of you whose questions were not answered here today, we will also post answers to those in the next day or two. All right, seeing no further questions, I think we will wrap things up here. Again, thanks to all of you for proposing to TechFlights, for taking the time to figure out this new dual anonymous peer review system. We are really excited about the opportunity that it gives us to really stay focused on technical merit and give everybody a very fair chance at having their proposal considered by the evaluation committee. And so again, thank you to all of you who are working to use this new system. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Have a great day, and thanks again for your time.